You're muted, Maureen.
Oh, hang on, I'm unmuted. Yes, right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to meeting number 2625 of the Caledonian Philatelic Society. Our speaker this evening needs absolutely no introduction because he's one of our own, Mr. Terry Woods, who is going to give us a talk on early registration labels, which I'm sure will be very interesting. So please, Terry, when you're ready, go ahead.
Right, yeah, thanks very much, Maureen. What's happening here? Is that us? Come on.
There we are, I think so.
Come on. You're sharing screen. Right, okay. Can you see that?
Yes, lovely.
I can see it. I can see it. Mother one. I have to remember which one I'm on. Right. Scotland's first registration labels. That's what the display is tonight. Now, registration labels, well, it is part of Scottish postal history, British postal history, world postal history, because all countries after the UPU inaugurated registration labels gradually used them. But we didn't use them until 1907. So why did I get interested in labels? Well, when I came to write up some of the registered covers that I had, I noticed, first of all, this one from Hamilton, then this one from Wishaw, and then this one from Lanark. And I think you can clearly see that the three labels are different. And this is certainly from the early days of registration labels. So I thought, well, I better go and find out something about them. And that's what I did. I got James Mackay's book, Registered Mail of the British Isles. And that gave us some information about the labels. So what I've done after that is gradually I moved from solely Lanarkshire, which is my main interest, of course, to Scotland. So I collect Scottish labels. That doesn't mean to say that I collect every single label that I can find, but certainly each type of label, because as it turns out, there's quite a lot. Now, before we go on to look at the labels, first of all, we should have a look at registered mail as it was prior to the introduction of labels. Registered mail, or registration of mail, was introduced in 1841. And at that time, there was no guaranteed compensation for losses until 1878. Additional insurance for inland register letters was introduced in 86 and subsequently extended on a number of occasions. Although generally speaking, it was possible to register any item of mail, parcels could not be registered before 1891 or after 1972. Registration eventually merged with the special delivery system in 1993, as in practice, the two systems had many similarities of handling. From January the 6th, 1841, letters could be sent by registered post for a fee of 1 shilling, but there was no compensation for loss, as I said. The fee had to be paid in cash, and the postage either in cash or by adhesive postage stamps. The registration rate was gradually reduced over the years, and registered stationery was introduced on the 1st of January 1878, although the public was not compelled to use it. And labels with serial numbers were not introduced until 1907. Now, this is the notice that the Postmaster General, or I should say the Secretary of the Post Office, Mr. Maverley, sent out in December 1840 to intimate to postmasters and the public that registered mail would be available or a registered system would be available from the 6th of January, 1841. And just what I've summarised there is in the first three little paragraphs. Although with regard to foreign mail, at this time, you had to actually, you could only register it to the port where it went on from. Now, we'll look at these, the early registration rates, first of all. This is from the first rate, which was 1 shilling. As you can see, this is a letter from 1848 from Hamilton. It has the penny stamp, which prepays the postage. And you can see that red squiggle in the middle, which signifies 1 shilling in manuscript. So that's that first rate. Now, after that, it was reduced. And then it was reduced again to 4p. It was reduced to 6p and then to 4p. Here's a couple of covers with the manuscript registered at Bothwell. You can see down in the corner. One has a tuppenny rate for postage, one with a penny rate for postage, and a 4p stamp to prepay the registration fee. A couple of nice little covers there. Here's another later one from Hamilton again, 1890. Many of the letters that you see around about this time, the local ones, seem to be return letters to the courts of the Sheriff Court in Hamilton, Lanark, Glasgow, anywhere in the country. Because a lot of these people that were incited to go to the courts disappeared. And here's one here that, well, it seems to have made it to its destination because it was going to a solicitor there by the looks of it. And it looks quite attractive because it's got the 6 halfpenny stamps cancelled by the Hamilton 173 small date stamp. And this was actually posted from Peacock Cross, which is one of the nearby sub-offices in Hamilton, although it's no longer at Peacock Cross. Another one from Hamilton, this time a letter that has a printed notice in the top, and once again it's a citation from the court. This is at Hamilton, and it's a threepenny rate at this time for registration, an Edwardian one. Register stationery was introduced on the 1st of January 1878, but the public could still use their own envelopes. Here are a couple of early uses of different envelopes. This one from Lesmehagel to Hamilton in 1891, and this one here, which is slightly different. It's got fee paid down in the corner, whereby you paid, that signifies the registration fee. The early registered envelopes here had this stamp on the label, on the flap on the reverse of the cover, and the public had to pay the postage. In other words, add the penny there. So a couple of nice little local items to me, Coatbridge and Lesmehagel. Here's something I bought recently. I must admit I was really disappointed to get it, although I had been looking forward to it. It's the front of a registered letter from Dolphington going to Prussia. And I'm sure everybody that was bidding on it thought it was a cover. And when I got it home, I'm afraid I was very upset and contacted the seller right away. Fortunately, he was very amenable and gave me about a 90% discount on the price. So I was prepared to keep it at that, just as a novelty, because although it's got tuppence put on the front there, and it would have tuppence for registration on the flap and the envelope, the rate to Europe at this time was tuppence halfpenny per half ounce. So there either must have been another halfpenny stamp on the reverse, or there should have been, because the London mark on there suggests that as there is no postage due hand stamp, that it was fully prepaid. But it's still an interesting little item from a very, very small village down in Lanarkshire. The next one is from Bothwell, going to France. At this time, the overseas registration rate was the same as the inland registration, but the UPU postal rate at this time was twopence halfpenny per half ounce, and this one here is a double rate. It's the 4-penny stamp added to it, and you can see that it's gone via Glasgow, and the red mark underneath it is London. That's going to France, a nice little item. The next one is similar, an Edwardian one going to from Carluke to Hamburg. This time it's a single rate letter, and you can see it's got an added penny halfpenny stamp to make up the rate. Another little pretty cover. Now, one of the things about prior to the introduction of the labels, one of the concerns of the UPU was when any country sent a letter which was registered, which required some kind of special handling in the mail. Some countries at this time didn't have labels or hand stamps which indicated registration. All that they would have would be the postage stamps or a manuscript mark. Now, your wee guy out in Venezuela or down in the middle of Africa or out in China wouldn't know the difference between an ordinary letter and a registered letter. So firstly, they introduced hand stamps in this country. In this around about 1883, they had these oval hand stamps with the R in them. You can see one here on this parcel post label, and also this kind of label here. They were introduced about 1883. And that was the kind of first labels that went on, or hand stamps to indicate registration from the smaller towns. Now, the larger towns such as Glasgow, Edinburgh, Aberdeen, Dundee, now they may have had registration hand stamps of some kind that they would have put on their envelopes. But out in the sticks here in Hamilton, up in Lanark, Carluke, Bothwell, Motherwell, etc., they didn't have registered date stamps even. Nothing to indicate that they were registered until the registered envelopes come out. So they went on to the envelopes. So we're showing a couple of covers here. The one on the right is a Victorian one, another citation, court citation from Lanark. It's been returned to sender, it's been refused, returned to sender, but it's got these, they are in the corner there to signify registration. And the one below there is from Greenock, Blackhall Street, Greenock, going across to Gourock. Couple of nice little covers there. Then we had, as I said, we had labels with the R to signify prepayment or payment of registration. And here's one from Musselburgh going down to Great Yarmouth in 1902. Now, we're going to come on to look at the registration labels. On the 18th of February 1907, the Post Office adopted the use of Universal Postal Union style registration labels. And from that date, labels were to be affixed to all mail which was sent registered. From 1907 to 1939, Scotland used labels which were quite distinct from their English counterparts, according to James Mackay in his book. The first labels were printed in sheets of 50 and were perforated for easy separation. Now, I make that statement there that the labels were quite distinct from their English counterparts, according to Mr. James Mackay. Well, you're going to find out that that's perhaps not the case as we go through them. Because unfortunately, when you do write books about stuff, you've got to be prepared to be shot down in flames in this case. So we're going to look at the first labels now. Now, the basic format of the labels, whereas these four here, it was a box with the R at the side. On the left-hand side, the town post office name and a serial number below it with a prefix. The first one on the top left, Dunshelt, I think that's how you pronounce it, that was the basic number one type that went to the most post offices. Then the B one on the right, which this one is Dundee 3. The 3 was printed on, signifying that that was sub post office number 3 in Dundee, which I don't actually know which one that was, because they could move around. And then below, we've got another one there. It's got the office name, and it's got a line where you either stamped the number or the printed in the number of the sub office. Then we had the D-type labels, which are the large blank labels, which were primarily for small villages and small towns, which didn't warrant the expense of having special labels printed from them. So that was them. And what we're going to do, first of all, is tell you who printed the labels. The first labels were printed by Morrison and Gibb of Edinburgh. And this little card, there's actually two cards, is their correspondence card from Morrison Gibb, 11 Queen Street, Edinburgh. That was their office, but they actually had their work at Tanfield. And on the sheets of labels, under label number 40, the sheets were printed actually in 5 lines, 5 vertical lines of 10, 40 being at the second one from the bottom left. And underneath that, it has, as you can see, 7/12 M&G Limited. Now, the 7/12 signifies that it was printed in July 1912, and M&G being Morrison and Gibb Limited. Now, for all those that are in the Scottish Postal History Society, there is an article in the next journal, which is at the printers, entitled Morrison and Gibb, Printers of Edinburgh, their place in Scottish postal history. So I won't actually tell you much more about them just now, other than to say that they were pretty big in printing. Now we're going to look at the large sheet labels first of all. And the first one that I'm showing here is type 1. Mr. Mackay labeled all the examples that he found as type 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., all the way up for both the large and the small labels. So this is type 1 of the large label. And as you can see, I've said at the top, previously unrecorded, used in Scotland, and only 2 examples known in cover. Well, I only know of 2 examples used in cover. And this is from October 1908. It's Kirkcudbright, and it has the basic rate, tuppenny registration plus penny postage. And it has, as you can see, label number 62. Now, these large labels, as I said, they were printed in sheets of 50, and generally speaking, they were for the smaller offices. So usually they only got 1 sheet, and it was numbered 1 to 50. And then when they started the next sheet, it would be 1 to 50 again. But very few, I've actually seen very few labels with the upper range from 51 to 100. And that surprisingly is one of them. So this is actually quite a special cover, as not only been one of two known examples in Scotland, but there must be more. People will have them, but don't know how scarce they are. And then again, maybe somebody's sitting there in tons of them and they're not scarce at all. But that's the way it goes. Now, the next one is actually the only other one that I've seen. And this is from Kilmichael Glassery in Argyll. And that's going via the Greenock and Odrishig Packet Grenadier there. And that once again is label 51. That one was sold on eBay recently, last year. Unfortunately, couldn't get it, but I got a picture of it just for my records. Another lovely colour. And then we go on to what Mr. Mackay labels type 12. Once again, you can see that the R is on the right-hand side here. This was something that the UPU didn't really like, because all the other labels in the rest of the world had the R on the left-hand side. But eventually they did change that. There's a couple of nice ones here. Scarinish and Tobermory there from Little Islands. There's Seamill and Ely there, Innerleithen and Newport 5. I must admit, I do like the large sheet labels. Here's one used from Betty Hill up by Caithness, coming down to Glasgow. It's a nice, a pretty little cover. Appropriately used, and you can see that that's number 43, which, as I said, usually they only went up to 50. Here's one again. This time it's in the upper range. It's from Cumnock in Ayrshire, number 63. A nice, that looks good. The idea was that you can see that it's been cancelled by the Cumnock date stamp, but on the label itself, they either had to put in a hand stamp or use a date stamp without the date plugs in it, or write it out in manuscript. Here's one from Denny in Stirlingshire. And at first glance, I thought that had been printed on, but it's a kind of crude hand stamp. And it's actually the only one that I've ever seen from Scotland, or should I say, on this particular type 12 label. It's a nice wee cover, just going across to Edinburgh from Denny. It's got the Falkirk stamp on it and the Edinburgh. Now, I do like to try and get foreign correspondence, overseas mail, and then particularly I do like mail from Scotland to France. I don't know, I think I did actually, did I show a small collection on Zoom? I may have done in the past, showing rates to France, either to you or it was to another society. But this one here is going from Armadale in West Lothian with the large label, and it's got the Edwards Tuppence Halfpenny and Tuppeny stamp on it there. It is. To pay the postage of Tuppence Halfpenny and Tuppence registration once again. I quite like that one. Now we come to a different type of label, number 13, type 13. This is one of the scarcest ones, and I've never seen this one in cover, although I do have a couple of examples of the label. It has the R is a different R. If you just look at that one there, you'll see that the leg is kind of rounded, whereas that there is straight down. Well, that one's from Milton or Campsie. And then we come to type 14, which is very similar to the previous one, but with the R now transposed to the left-hand side. This type seems to be quite elusive as well. You can see that this one's actually addressed to Jim Tierney, a well-known Glasgow stamp collector and philatelist of years gone by. They seem to get a lot of them done at the mobile post office at the Cowell Games at Dunoon in 38, and this is one of them. But at least it's used on cover, which I like. Now we come to one of the more familiar to those that collect postal history and registered mail, one of the more familiar labels. This was the kind of latest one that was produced, and you find a lot of them in the Highland Show and the General Assembly hand stamps for the 1950s. But these ones, you can get lots and lots of hand stamps used here, and you can see Linlithgow, Jedburgh, and Broxburn, West Lothian there. The postmasters had to provide their own hand stamps, by the way, on these. Here's one from Langham, Dumfriesshire. This is in 1964, so it's relatively late, but that's a small town. As you know, Langham is relatively small down in Dumfriesshire. So they would use that one when they ran out of their, at this time, their coil labels. Hand stamps varied considerably, and as you can see, I'm showing a lot more of these ones than I did of the others, because it's one of the more, as I say, more popular labels. Kilmarnock, Dunbar, Biggar, Leven, Bellsell, Stranraer, Ladybank, Gifford, and Beath. They're all very attractive with the hand stamps on them. And the hand stamps, as I said before, were undated, but occasionally you can find them with the date stamps in full on them. And we've got them there, showing them on the left from Auchterarder, Auchtermurty, and a couple from a Lanarkshire collection of Lanark and Douglas, and the covers from Earlston, Berwickshire. You can see once again that all those labels are all in the lower range, 1 to 50. 45 is the highest one there. Here's one that was used to belong to our late member, Dr. Ian Evans. This has got the Up Special TPO Glasgow section on it. You can find many covers with different registration labels on them. It's a nice looking one, but 54 a wee bit later. Now, you can get varieties of, as you get varieties of everything. And here's one from the Royal Highland Show in 1960, where you can see that the label has been misperfed, shall we say. It's that's just a bit of a novelty. Now, as I said, Mr. Mackay said we used labels that were distinct from the rest of the country. Well, the first one we show at the start was unrecorded by him in Scotland, and these are another two that he doesn't have used in Scotland. On the right, that the left, the piece is from the Fries Royal Highland Show in 1938, when it's got a Type 2 label that was supposedly never only used in England. And on the right, at the Empire Commonwealth Games in 1970, we have this different label that was used during the games at their mobile post office. So another couple of discoveries. And then with this label here, that Mr. Mackay hadn't recorded either as being a label, never mind being used in Scotland. So this one here is from the Royal Highland Show in 1974. And also we have one with Eyemouth written on it, which was the other way of doing it, as I said. And that is quite a distinct. Ireland had a style similar to that, but I've seen these used in TPOs down in England. Now we come to the more familiar type and smaller labels that were introduced in 1907. And you can see the R here is different. This was the first type of R that was used on the small labels. Then we had this one here, which is just slightly larger than this type here, which seemed to remain in use all the way through till they came to this one here, which was a special one that they did for Edinburgh. So we're going to look at the smaller labels now. As you can see, some are perforated and some are relatively rough and others are distinctly rouletted. Now the first type here, as I said, they were introduced in the 18th of February, but the earliest example I have in cover is this one from March 4th, 1907 from Glasgow. This is an interesting envelope because it's the acknowledgement of delivery of the AR envelope that was given to the post offices or the postmasters throughout the UPU, where they just had to put on the front the name of the office and the country, and that would go to it. So this was sent registered back, and it has that first style Glasgow one there on it. Another one from Glasgow, but this one here is going to Germany. This is an interesting cover in the fact that it's been posted from, it's been sent by the Castle Cyanide Company Limited of St Vincent Place, Glasgow, to a gold and silver not manufacturer, but dealer in Frankfurt. Now you might think, why would the cyanide company be contacting a gold and silver merchant? Well, in those early days, at the turn of the century, that's the 19th and the 20th century, I should say, gold ore and silver ore was actually put into a solution of cyanide, and the cyanide sort of brought out, melted the gold or the silver so that it was easily extracted from the ore. However, as you know, cyanide is a very highly poisonous substance. So it was fortunate that they found another compound that was able to dissolve the gold and the silver so that it could be taken out much more safely. But interesting when it's got that kind of story to it. Once again, this is going to, what you'll see that many of the covers that I have in this section now, most of them are going overseas because I like destination covers. So this one's going to Germany. And right through this time, the registration is tuppence, and the UPU basically is tuppence halfpenny. Here's one going to South Africa this time in 1915 from Glasgow again. We put this one in because the FRUPME registration label was sufficient to pay the postage this time because of the Empire postal rate that we had at this time for Commonwealth countries. And the rate was a penny for under half an ounce. So the FRUPME rate, the FRUPME envelope would be sufficient to take that to Johannesburg. Here's another one that is an illustration from Dr. Evan Evans's collection, Hurlford. It's actually the only one that I've ever seen with of this type of label with the town or the office name in capital letters. although this one is just going to Edinburgh. It's still scarce. I've been trying to buy it off the dealer that's got it, but he wants to sell it in a bundle, and I'm not prepared to pay for it. A bundle that I don't think is worth it. But it's still a nice one to have for the records. Now, once again, we've found another little variety here on this early label. You can see I've got blown up the R, and you can see that there's a crack on it. There's a crack there from North Queensferry. This is going to Blair Gowrie in Perthshire, and you can see North Queensferry date stamp, Blair Gowrie there, and it's went via Edinburgh. This from my registration rate again. Once again, this one here, this one time it's going back to Sweden from the Stock Exchange in Glasgow, the Stock Exchange Post Office in Glasgow. And you can see that because it's an envelope, it's got actually got fourpence halfpenny on it, twopence halfpenny postage, twopence registration, and it's also very much mispersed. And this label here now has, it's the sub office, so a Stock Exchange at this time must have been using #1 label. Here's another one from St Andrews, but this time using the blank, where they put in the number of the office, the sub office. That's from Ellis Place in St Andrews, just going locally there. Still a nice little item. Here's a larger registered envelope from Garscombe Road in Glasgow. The registration fee, it's fourpence this time. You can see they've added it down in the corner. And that they added tuppence plus the threepenny charge on the envelope, prepaid postage and registration. And this is Garscombe Road, must have been number 40 at this time. And you can see it there. Now we come on to a couple of different labels. It still has the same type of R, but the main difference now is in these, the prefix number here, NO. You can see that this one here, which is type 2, has a sans serif N and a thin tall O, whereas this one here has a serifed N and a thicker O. And these are perhaps some of the most elusive of all the Scottish sheet labels. And Mr. Mackay says that he'd only recorded them from a few sub-post offices in Edinburgh. So I've managed to find one on cover here of the type 2 from Hope Street in Edinburgh, another basic cover, but I've yet to find another one with this label on it. Quite a nice one. Going to Davidson Mains. I've always liked the name Davidson Mains. But this one here, Mr. Mackay said that these labels were only used in 1907. Well, this one's used in 1908, so this adds to the knowledge that we've gained. Then we come to the similar type with the serifed prefix, and this is from George Street, Edinburgh. I got this cover from Bruce Auckland, going about 45 years ago or something like that. Found it in a box, didn't realise that it was one of the good ones. So there you are, it's going to Preston Pans at the basic rate. And of course, as Mr. Mackay said, they're only from Edinburgh. So here's one from Dundee, which extends the known use of these labels to towns other than Edinburgh. It is actually early in 1907, April 1907, which is a good month, but Dundee, and I think this is a pretty cover. It's going to Prussia. Very pretty cover. But it seems to be that the total with the added stamps there is 7pence. So it should have been Symptoms Hate Me. That's £5 for the registration plus twopence hate me for the postage for the UPU rate to Germany, but the postmaster hasn't picked up on it. Well, I keep, every time I look at the cover, I add up these postage stamps, but it still comes to Symptoms rather than Symptoms Hate Me. But another pretty cover. Now we come to the Type 4 label. Once again, these were printed by Morrison and Gibb. The R is slightly larger and now it looks more like the English type, but it has this large stop, and also the 7s and the 5s and the 2s have the leg or the top part bar are straight rather than curved. And these are quite elusive. Mr. Mackay once again said that they were used only in 1907, 1908, but you'll see that they actually stretch beyond that. Here's another citation envelope from Lanark showing that particular label, the Type 4, a nice little one. This was one of the first ones that I looked at when I first started collecting. Lanark to Lark Hall, and then they weren't known there, so it was sent back to the Sheriff Court in Lanark. Another nice one, an Edwardian one. Here's the same label again, although this time it has the sub office here for Hope Street. It's number 3 this time. And this cover, nice wee one, we added Penny Hate Me this time to make up the tuppenny rate to Italy. Another wee nice little cover. Here's another one going to Sweden this time. And this time, the sender has actually put the stamps on first. And the postmaster, when he's got it, couldn't peel them off. So he said, a penny hate me, sender's excess, and he signed it. You can see that up at the top there. He's put that on after he's put the label on because it's written over the label. And this is going to Sweden, which once again would have been twopence registration and twopence hate me postage, but it's got 6pence on there. Twopence hate me plus a hate me and threepence. Another pretty cover. Now we move away to the Type 5 labels, which were in use for many, many years, up until they were first came into use in 1909, and they were phased out 20 years later in 29, when the rouletted labels were introduced. And one of the things about the post office was at this time, it was waste not, want not. They will use up all their old stock of labels before they use the new ones. So they can be found a lot later. Once again, these were printed by Morrison and Gibb, and here's one here showing M&G for Morrison and Gibb, and the 810 for printed in the August 1910. One from Kilmacombe, one with the sub office number, and one from Lerwick here where they're supposed to put in the sub office. Here's one from DC Thompson going to the US of A. And the US of A still had a special transatlantic rate at this time of 1 penny. So it was still threepence, twopence registration plus a penny postage. And that's going to the Boston Home Needlework magazine, Maureen. That would be interesting.
Yes, looks good. I'll pinch it.
No, no chance. I'll give you a 40, but no, you're not getting it.
Right, you're always a gentleman, Terry.
Here's one from Glasgow. This time it's actually going to Switzerland, and it's going to the Bureau the Secours aux Prisonniers de Guerre. It's actually the British for the helpers for the British prisoner of war in Switzerland and Bern. A nice little cover. I thought there might have been a censor mark on it since it was going out the country at this time, but it must have went through neutral territory to get there. So 1916, still nice address as well as a nice destination. And it's once again, it's got that penny halfpenny added to make it up to fourpence halfpenny, tuppence registration, and tuppence halfpenny UPU. Now we come to a couple of other covers. Going to France, up on the right there from Glasgow. It's fourpence halfpenny again, making up the basic rate. And another one from Upper Largo to Germany. And that's the same, although the same rate. Another couple of pretty covers. Here's another one that I got a while ago. This time it's from Dalkeith, Midlothian, and it's going to Zululand. I've got it for two reasons. The destination, obviously, but the label has both the post office name and the county, number 4, which is a low one. It also, it has, this is 1921, and it has a registration rate that's been of symptoms. I've seen a couple of covers to Zululand, and they're both high rates. They must be putting some coinage or something in them. But registration is symptoms, but also it's been the Empire rate at this time was tuppence halfpenny for under 2 ounces, so it was relatively heavy. And unfortunately, there's no marks on the back to say that it arrived in Zululand or where it landed. None at all, only that English mark on the front from London. But still a wee bit grubby, but still very nice. As I said, these labels were used until they run out. And here's one here. It's actually a first day cover that's been registered in 1937, but it's addressed and it's been addressed to and is sent by Mr. James Merrilees, the well-known Scottish farthist that some of us may remember from the 1960s, 70s, and 80s before he died. Well, I'm assuming he's dead. I haven't heard of him for a long time. A nice wee cover there from Cairney, up by Huntly in Aberdeenshire. Now, one thing that Mr. Mackay doesn't mention in his book anywhere is that the labels were printed, many of them were printed in 2 passes. It seems that the sheets were printed blank for some of them, all in that big blue colour. And then when some of the smaller towns ran out, they would reprint just with the town name. And you can clearly see that in this particular one. I've blown up the label. You can see that there's 2 distinct colours there. There's really dark blue and that kind of bright blue. And plus you can see that this here is a kind of thick printing rather than the thin, fine printing of Kilmacombe. This is just going to London, but it's a nice little cover there from 1919, and it's a threepence halfpenny label because the postages went up to a penny halfpenny at this time. Another one here, 1911, is with this one here. These series are going to have the sub-office number on them. This is M&G for Morrison and Gibb again from Marchmont Road in Edinburgh, this little cover going to Germany, where they added penny halfpenny. Another nice pretty cover. Edinburgh 3, which is the cross at Edinburgh. This one's going to India. And of course, this was the Empire rate, so the threepenny envelope was sufficient to pay the postage plus the tuppence registration. Another nice little one. Here's one from 1923. It's been insured, so it was actually containing something of value going to Austria. And it's got the insured label attached to it, as well as the Glasgow registration label, which has a few scores on it that seems to have been from the German post office. The basic insurance fee was 5s, which covered up to £12. And it's actually got you can see up at the top up here that it's actually tells you what it's insured for. The postage to Austria was tuppence halfpenny. The envelope plus the added threepence equals sixpence halfpenny, which was enough to pay that 5s plus the tuppence halfpenny postage. Another nice looking one. And then we come to the labels of this type with where you insert the number. And here's one going to Egypt from Falkirk. Another nice destination. It's going to the Deutsche Orient Bank in Alexandria. Nice handwriting there as well. From Stirling Road in Falkirk to Alexandria, Egypt. And Egypt at this time was included in the Empire postal rate scheme at this time. So this envelope was sufficient to pay the postage. Another couple here, this time from Campbelltown and Ardrossan. And as you can see, it's the label where the postmaster was supposed to put in the sub-office number, but it looks like these ones have been used at the head office. And these are local Scottish ones. This one, Ardrossan to Rutherglen and Campbelltown to Edinburgh. Another couple of pretty covers. Here's one here. 1914, going from Lerwick, Shetland via Aberdeen and Edinburgh to Washington, DC. Once again, the USA still had the special rate and the tuppence registration, which meant that this envelope once again was sufficient to pay the postage and registration. And of course, the label once again is the sub-office type, which seems to have been used at the head office in Lerwick. Now, we changed to a different type of label, type 6. And at this time, the contract to print the labels changed to Bishop and Sons. And the major distinguishing feature of these labels here, because it kept the same kind of R, is this small O in the prefix. And these ones here, they can be found perforated or rouletted. Now, this one here is the fourpence halfpenny envelope, which is threepence registration plus penny postage, because the basic registration rates, etc., increased from the 13th of June 1921 at this point. So everything was starting to get a wee bit more expensive. And I just noticed I've left the price on that one there. Here's one from Newport 5, which has it's going to Germany. It has the date 7/23, which is July 1923, and B&S Limited. That's 1932. And once again, the penny added prepays the rate to Germany and the postage. Here's another cover that I think is quite pretty. It has label number 10 from the sub office, which was Elm Row number 18 in Edinburgh. It's going to Dresden in Germany. And this is a label from the corner, the right-hand bottom corner of the sheet. And you can see it's been rouletted. There was actually, normally there was a bit of selvage going a wee bit further to the right there, which they didn't, they didn't perforate at times, but they seem to have done it in this one. And you've got 6p postage there, which means that it's been overpaid by halfpenny, because it should really have only been 5p halfpenny, 2p halfpenny postage plus 3p registration. Another nice little cover. And here's one of a similar label, this time with the sub office stamped on it, going to the US of A. This time it's a 3 envelope with the added 3p to pay the registration. At this time, USA, it was now a penny halfpenny to post a letter to the USA. January 1933, we're looking at a different type now. This type of label has the name in capitals. Once again, printed by Bishop and Sons. And this 4p halfpenny envelope from Breakish, which is a little town in the Isle of Skye. Although it's going to Jedburgh, you can see that it's got the hand stamps here for Breakish and some other town in Rossshire that I cannot make out there. I don't think any of you can either. But still a nice one from a little island. And this type with the capitals is only known related. Here's a similar type from Glasgow, but this time with the sub office number following the name, the town post office name. And this is another interesting cover. It's going from Glasgow to Jerusalem, Palestine. And this time the 4p halfpenny envelope was sufficient to pay the postage and registration, as Palestine was under British mandate at this time. So it came under the Empire rate, penny halfpenny postage and 3p registration. A nice little one. I do like that one. That's going from Crown Street in Glasgow. Now we change to a different type of label, once again printed by Bishop and Sons. You can see it here, and it's got 9/26 being September 1926, being the printing date. But you can see the difference in this label from the previous one. We have lost the prefix. There's no longer a prefix on this label. They were printed as blank, and the number was put in with a separate rotary machine, that numbered rotary machine. And once again, this one's going to Canada, and the 4p halfpenny envelope was sufficient to pay the postage and registration at this time. These labels, according to Mr. Mackay, were only found used at Glasgow and Aberdeen. And I must admit, they are a wee bit elusive. And here's the one from Aberdeen here, and this is 1925. It's just going to London, but it's got the Aberdeen. And of course, as Mr. Mackay says, they're only used in Aberdeen and Glasgow. So here's one from Oban in 1923. Another nice little cover. It's actually a really bright sort of violety blue color. and the rotary machine is in black ink now as well. So this one extends the known use of these labels to towns other than Glasgow and Aberdeen. And this is type 10C. Although sheet labels were phased out from October 1929, a distinctive sheet label was prepared for Edinburgh and can be found used at the temporary mobile post offices at the Highland Show and the General Assembly. And this is one from the Highland Show in 1955. And you can see it there, a small perforated label. And that brings us to the end of those first labels. And while I was talking, I mentioned rouletted labels, and we're going to have a wee quick look at the rouletted labels of Scotland. And that's, these were distinct labels. They were only used, this type was only used in Scotland. And there's only a handful of types of these, and they vary by the different prefix here. The first type has a large serifed N, and you can see a few here, just giving you the labels. There's one on a cover from Hamilton to Edinburgh in 1935. Here's a sub-office type from Edinburgh going to Denmark. This is actually quite a large cover. It's from Princess Street sub-office in Edinburgh. And you can see this large serif on that one. Then the second type still has the large serif N on it, but the post office is in lowercase. And there's an example there, and then there's the B type with the sub-office number on it. The third type is very similar, except that it has back to the capital letters, but has a small prefix N with serifs. And according to Mr. Mackay, they had five five-figured serial numbers, which these came in rolls. So I don't think it came in a roll of 26 or 30,000 labels. I think they just continued the same as the sheets, printed them 1 to 50 and then 50, 1 to 100 and so on and so on. So I think these were printed in rolls of 1,000 labels. So I don't know how many labels they printed off, but there you are, 26, a big number. And here's one from Lanark. And this is in here because Mr. Mackay said that they didn't come with four-figured serial numbers. So there you are from Lanark. Now we're coming to the end, the last leg. We have a different prefix now. It's sans serif, and here's a reconstructed coil strip of 4. I managed to get 4 separate ones the same with consecutive numbers, and a couple of 4 other ones here. Law, which is up by Carluke. Don't know where that is, but it's in Scotland. Livingston Station and Glen Eagles Hotel. Couple of nice ones there. And here's one on cover from Reston, Berwickshire, going to Gordon and Berwickshire, just down the road. And one another, a nice little cover. Once again, it's Fort Meshatemy registration envelope. And then you can get these labels once again with the office and the county, so that, or the office and the head office, which is Denham Hoyk. And then we'll get Kilmarnock, and that's got a 5-figure serial number, 10,000, which you do get, as I say, in some of them, cup for 5 cereals. But then we come to the similar label with the capital letters and the sub-office number. And this is High Blantyre going to Edinburgh in 1937. And then we have the final types. Very similar, but this time it's lowercase characters on the label with the same prefix as before. And this one's from Douglas Water, another little Lanarkshire village, 1937, just going to Edinburgh. Another nice little one. And we have the similar one, but this time with the added number for the sub-office, and this time it's Langlow and Coatbridge. Only going to Edinburgh, but this is an envelope and it's had the George V photogravure issue been added to it to prepay the postage. And that concludes the related labels. They were phased out from 1939 and the use of distinctive labels in Scotland ended. When the coil labels were introduced in other parts of the UK in 1931, they differed dramatically from the Scottish labels in paper, design, colour and method of separation. They were perforated instead of being rouletted. And it was these universal type labels which were issued throughout Scotland from about 1939 and remained in use in various formats until the mid-1980s. But that's another story. And that's us come to the end here. So I hope you enjoyed it. Maybe I didn't realize I spoke so long.
Well, Terry, I found it fascinating. By the way, Leesmill is just north of Arbroath.
Oh well,
So
both.
it so happened my phone was sitting beside me and I looked it up. Anyway, but I'll be asking you that I've been typing out the. Anyway, before we go on to trivia, thank you, Terry. I'm sure most of us knew absolutely nothing about labels because we just stuck them on. We just bought a registered envelope. I remember being sent to the post office for a registered envelope, and that was the end of story as far as I knew. That was for the birthday present, postal order in it or something. Anyway, would everybody please like to join me in thanking Terry for his wonderful display and in the usual way. So thank you very much, Terry.
Super. You're welcome.
And we will no doubt call on you at other times for other things. But in the meantime, next week we have, this is a follow on from our contact with Leeds Philatelic Society, because I emailed Richard Smith a couple of times and discovered that he has an actual display of his own, and he is going to show us next week a display on what he calls Cynicus. But Cynicus is seemingly a name for William Anderson. He makes a whole lot of political type postcards. So next week's a political postcard display from Richard Smith of Leeds. But he said that William Anderson was actually a Scot, so some of the postcard club members might know all about him, but I know nothing about it. But I'm looking forward to the display next week. So I don't think I have anything else to say. So thank you very much for all your attendance. And I look forward to seeing you next week. And I will be contacting you about the face-to-face meeting and the dinner in the Hilton, which is in March. So thank you for coming along this evening. Nice to see you all. Take care and keep safe. Night.